Recording. Okay. Al Haile, the modern Yeshua Mashiach, Misharenan Milap, Milte, the Maria Lacha Haya. Reverend Hanny, the Lord's Prayer, please.
Yes. Awun duashmayanat qaddash shmach te malkutach nehwe soyanach ikanna duashmaya abbar'a حولا لحمة سنقانا يومنا واشوق لان حوبين إكنا دار حنان شوقا لحيوين لا تعلن نسيونه إلا قصا من بيشة متول دي لاخي ملكوثة وحيلة وتشبحته العالم عالمين Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Well, we're going to continue now with the book of the Revelation. I got many emails requesting that I continue with the book of the Revelation, but anytime you wish me to stop, I will do so, okay? So there's one thing, as a little teeny bit review. Remember, there are 22 chapters in the book of the Revelation, and the first 3 chapters, the first chapter is like a preface. And then the second and third chapter is your study about the 7 assemblies that were in trouble. And then the actual revelation starts in the 4th chapter and goes through the 22nd chapter, about halfway through, or maybe a little more, of the 22nd chapter, and it's an epilogue at the final end of it there. So the prologue starts with the first chapter, and then the basic introduction about the 7 churches, and then the revelation starts in the 4th chapter. You realize when this was written, wasn't written in chapters and verses. It was written as a series of visions, and the first part of it was introducing the vision, and then also an admonition to the 7 churches that were in Asia Minor. Now, as I said last week, that I really don't use the book of the Revelation, but this book was responsible for getting me into going into the Aramaic, because people had asked me, even when I was a young minister in San Antonio, and I was teaching on the north side of town in San Antonio in a home, and they had asked me after I taught the book of Genesis if I would teach on the book of the Revelation, and I said no, I didn't want to do that. I said it would take a Near Easterner to unlock that book. And the 2 people, the husband and wife's home that I was lecturing in, was Lieutenant Colonel Marvin Lucas and his wife Paula. And they said, oh, we've heard a Near Easterner at the Episcopal Church here in San Antonio, and his name was Dr. George M. Lamza, and he has a book on the Revelation, a commentary on it. I said, oh, he does he? He says, yes. And they took me to their library and gave me his book and another book, My Neighbor Jesus. And that's what started me getting interested in the Aramaic and changed my life completely. And I never was the same. I never went to bed that night when I got home from teaching that class. And that never stopped since then. That was way back in the 1960s in San Antonio, Texas. And then finally, Dr. Lamza came and spoke at our Thanksgiving conference that we had for a week. So it was on the book of the Revelation, not the conference, but what started me in the Aramaic. And because I thought for a change, but it was really because of what he said in the entire New Testament, because it brought great clarification. I thought there's got to be more to it, and especially to the teachings of Jesus. And the ball started rolling from then. Now, concerning this book, in the Peshitta text, the whole manuscript, what we call of the New Testament, this was not a part of the New Testament. What happened is in 395 AD, the Council of Carthage, an ecumenical council met in Carthage, and they were trying to decide which books of the New Testament should be allowed. What they call is they canonized it. They measured it, figured it out, and said, this is what we should have and what we shouldn't have. And so there are several of the epistles that we have that was not accepted in the original canon of the Aramaic text, the Peshitta. So you know the Peshitta was before 395 AD. And not only that, but they were debating between two books. One book was called the Book of Enoch, and the other book was the Book of the Revelation. But Enoch lost by 5 votes. They decided to accept the Book of the Revelation, it won by 5 votes. That's all. And it was quite a large council. I've forgotten how many exactly were in that council, but that's how it got into our New Testament. The reason why Aramaic-speaking people did not go for it, because it did not follow much of the teachings of Jesus. It didn't sound like Jesus at all. Okay, as you'll see when we get into it, and I'm going to explain 2 things about it. I didn't do this last Wednesday when we completed the entire first chapter of Revelation, and I described what I read to you, beginning with in the first chapter, was the appearance on the Lord's Day is on the 10th verse, all the way down. It gives you a description of the glorified, anointed Christ, Messiah, the Messiah. And you're getting a spiritual picture of the Messiah. Now, there's a reason I'm mentioning it again now, is because I didn't tell you this last week when I broke down all the meaning of the appearance of the Messiah. Remember, it's the Christ, the anointed. What he saw was the anointed being, not just Yeshua, not just Jesus. It was the anointed one, the complete. Because of our Greek, we always say Christ, but it's the Mashiach, the anointed one. The anointed one looks different than Jesus of Nazareth. So this is why he describes the anointed one. This is why when people try to make it a racial thing, this has nothing to do with race whatsoever. The description of the anointed Messiah, it is not Jesus they are describing here. It is the anointed one. That is the fullness of the Christ, the spiritual nature of the Christ. This is what the description is here. And that's what I didn't tell you last week when I gave that meaning of the description. And just as a quick, brief review of that first chapter, and starting with the 11th verse, rather than the repeat about the spirit of prophecy, the minute it says spirit of prophecy, it means he's seeing things spiritually with the spiritual eye and not with the physical eye. He's seeing through materialism, and this is what he sees. He sees, and I turned to the voice, because first he saw 7 menorahs. Now I'm giving you the Hebrew word, 7 menorahs or lampstands. It says candlesticks there, but when we think of a candlestick, we just think of one candlestick. No, the menorah, which was called a lampstand in English, but in Hebrew and Aramaic, and even in Aramaic it's using the same word. It means the menorah. We say lampstand, but it means the menorah. The menorah was the 7 candles 7 distinct candles on one lampstand. It branched up like a tree. And in fact, they even created little buds of almonds, because when they made the menorah, they made it in the shape of an almond tree. And that's why there's 7 of them, 7 lamps going up like this, candlesticks going up like this on a gold thing, because they had to put oil in it, because it wasn't made of wax. It was 7 branches, like a tree, 7 branches, and the budding almonds going up on each one of them, and on the top they lit it, and that was the 7 menorahs. So that's what he saw at first. He saw 7 stars and 7 menorahs, 7 Jewish lampstands that was in the temple. In the temple, they only had 1, but he sees 7 here. And I described that to you, but and then he heard a voice like a trumpet, which means a command. And so he describes what he saw. And the first thing he says, in the midst of the 7 menorahs, picture 7 menorahs in a circle, 7 of them, of course. And each menorah has 7 branches, and they lit all 7. So here it is in a circle, 7, but right in the middle of them, right in the center of them was, and this is what you got to get, and that's why I explained it to you last week. In the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one resembling a human being. It says Son of Man. Dr. Lamza literally translates it from the Aramaic. Brenasha, Son of Man, but it means human being. That's how I would translate it. And which is correct, that's the meaning of it. How do I say human being in Aramaic? Brenasha. That's how I say it. That's the only way to say it. So human being, I saw one that resembled a human being. In other words, it wasn't a strange creature. It wasn't like all the strange symbols and odds, an appearance of a human being. It resembled a human being. The reason why he uses the word resembled, means the shape, is because there was something outstanding. What was outstanding? The description of him. He was wearing a long white robe, which denoted priesthood, and then the golden bands on him, which represented royalty, and a golden girdle that's around him here. And then his head was white as wool, his hair. It's white as wool, white as snow. In other words, his hair was like bright, and it goes into all the descriptions. So what I didn't tell you is, not only did this mean the presence of the Christ in the 7 assemblies, which I explained last week, because he's talking about in Asia Minor. He is in Asia Minor, which is Turkey. He's in Turkey, because that's what we're familiar with. He's in Turkey, and I've been in Smyrna, I've been in Pergamos, I've been in some of these places in Asia Minor myself, and seen, but Smyrna now is a huge city. Ephesus, they're digging up Ephesus. There's a little place there, but they're digging and getting more and more. They're uncovering more and more of Ephesus. And I was in Ephesus 3 times since I was in that Holy Land area. I was there 3 times at Ephesus. But that's what I left you with the first church last week. But I want to tell you something else. What this means here, the white hair is a description of the anointed consciousness. This is a description of a Christ consciousness. In other words, in the true sense of being, I didn't teach you this last week. In the true sense of being, the consciousness has white hair, which I explained the meaning of that, which meant experience, real, genuine experience, spiritual experience, and it represented wisdom and experience. That's what the white hair represents. And that is what happens to us. The more we grow in the teachings of Jesus, we take on wisdom and we take on experience, spiritual experience. not just experience in the world, which we all have. As we keep aging, we keep experiencing. Some never learn from it. Some don't have the wisdom. But spiritually, this is what it's talking about. It's a spiritual consciousness. So what this is describing here, not only the presence of the living Messiah, the consciousness of the Messiah in the seven assemblies, because he's in the midst of the seven menorahs, seven of them, which was the seven assemblies. This is the consciousness that was there. And the reason why I have to tell you this is because when we start the second chapter, which begins the admonition to the seven assemblies or churches, it's going to take a portion of that consciousness to answer the problem that is in that particular assembly or church. Now, when I say churches, this is why I like to use assembly, meeting, in the meeting that they had in Ephesus, in the meeting that they had at Pergamos, in the meeting that they had at Thyatira, all these seven assemblies. A particular, after it describes each of these phenomenon in the consciousness, this is what it's going to appear, just that one part is going to appear in each church. So the answer to the difficulty and the problems that we're having in the church is that particular edge of consciousness that will solve the problem. Okay, so when you're reading the book of Revelation, make sure you take note of the description. The white hair, first of all, human being. A human being has this consciousness. That's what's important. That's what you got to get. Means all of you who follow the teachings of Jesus, you take on the anointed consciousness. Okay, so then you take on priesthood. Didn't I tell you that he made us a kingdom of priests? That's exactly what it says in Aramaic, a kingdom of priests. Lambda says spiritual kingdom. But that's literally, it says priesthood, which means you are your own priest. That's why you're with the long white vestment. So this consciousness has a consciousness of direct communion with God as a priest. You are your own priest. And you are your own royalty. You are your own royalty. That's the golden girdle that was around also the chest and the stomach area. All right. And then his eyes was like a flame of fire. When you have this kind of consciousness, you have strong conviction. And that's why it says his eyes were like a flame of fire. You can look at them. You know, some people, when they get so under the spirit that you can't look into their eyes. They even had trouble looking at Moses when he was so long fasting and he was up in the mountain and came back down. It said he had horns, but that was symbolic of glory. There was so much glory on his face, so much fire in his eyes, great conviction, because he had been saturated in the presence of God on the mountain. So here it's describing this Christ consciousness. We don't have to go up into a mountain. The only up we go into is into our own higher sense of self, the spiritual nature of our beings, which we call consciousness. What is our spiritual nature? Our spiritual nature is consciousness. Okay. So you take note of each one of those things. I explained it all last week. You need to go back over that. Okay, now we start the second chapter. To the messenger of the church of Ephesus, write. Now, it says to the angel because of Greek. Dr. Lambs has still used Greek. Angel comes from the Greek language, angelos. So here it should be messenger. I would put messenger. I would not put it as angel. And if you read his footnote, angel in this case means what? You see the footnote? The appointed head of the church. The appointed head of the church. So write a letter to the appointed head of the assembly. But what assembly? The one that's in Ephesus. The one that is in Ephesus. And in Ephesus, let me tell you, it was a major city in Turkey. Well, it wasn't called Turkey at that time, but in Asia Minor. And it had, I've been in it. I've been in what's left of the Temple of Diana. They still have the columns up, and you can go in, and the whole where you would meet in the Temple of Diana. I've been in there. I've been in that very temple at Ephesus. And so here he says, write a letter now. In other words, to this head of, we would say a pastor or someone who's in charge, the one who's taking care of everything for the people, the spiritual one that's there. Could even be an elder. We don't know which they had then. They did start having pastors, because Paul talks about that in his letters. Shepherds who, and that's spiritually, spiritual shepherds who shepherd the flock. So any head, whether it's an elder, a pastor, or someone just simply in charge, that's what it means when it says write to the letter. Why would an angel need a letter? And you had to write to the angel. Come on. It doesn't literally mean an angel. It's messenger. Every place you read angel. That's why he says, be ready, to judge even the angels. Means you judge other ministers. That's what it means. Not literally spiritual beings. You don't judge spiritual beings. You judge ministries and what they're saying and what they're telling you, okay? And Paul says that in his letters. So, to the messenger, the head messenger of the church of Ephesus, write, these things say the omnipotent one. He must have had a different book on Revelation, because the book I have in Aramaic doesn't have the word omnipotent in it. It's not there at all. It just says, these things says he. This is what my Aramaic text says he who possesses or holds the 7 stars in his right hands. The 7 stars are the 7 heads of the 7 assemblies. Who holds the 7 stars in his right hand. The right hand means the right hand of power, the right hand of authority. Right hand is always the blessed hand in the Near East. You never want to use your left hand. It's the right hand that is the blessing, especially in the ancient world where these customs were very, very strong. So for him to say that they were in his right hand means the hand of authority. So because why? These 7 angels or messengers, heads of the assembly, were responsible for giving the truth to the congregation, okay? So, who walks? The one who holds the 7 stars and who's in the midst of the 7 menorahs, that's in the verses above. He said, who holds the 7 stars, who walks. In other words, he's looking at everything, trying everything else, who walks in the midst of the 7 menorahs of gold. Even the branches going up were made of gold. That's what it says in the Aramaic text. Dr. Lamson says golden lamp. I would say lampstands or menorah. Everyone knows usually what a menorah is. So he says, I know your works. Works means I know your good habits. I know your behavior. I know how you treat people. I know how you're doing. That's what works means here. How you manifest your spiritual life. That's what works means. And your labor and your patience. And you had to have patience in those days to manifest what they were manifesting. And how you cannot endure those who are ungodly. Now he's talking about He's talking to the messenger as well as to the assembly. The ungodly, which means they don't care about justice. When you're ungodly, you see, to us, to believe in God in the ancient world, when you say, I believe in God, you're not saying, I believe God exists. To believe in God means you believe in justice, you believe in peace, you believe in harmony, you believe in unity, you believe in all that. In other words, you are expressing that. That's what it means to believe in God. Today, believing in God is, well, I don't believe God exists. And people who say, I believe in God, but don't follow God at all, just like they believe in Jesus, but don't believe Jesus. They don't follow his teachings. They don't even know it. They don't become students of Jesus. Jesus said, go into all the world, right? It's at the end of Matthew, and disciple the nations, disciple them. We're doing just the opposite. We say, go into all the world and save souls, save souls, save souls. That's not what Jesus said. Go into all the world and disciple souls, disciple the nations, make them students of my teachings. So there will be harmony and peace and joy and prosperity and health and love and unity. Big difference. Big difference. Okay, that's why in congregations, they bite back each other too. They do that fighting and income. When I even had a church in California, which was called the Church of Daily Living, when I first started it, and I had all the different committees and everything, and they were fighting each other, jealous of each other, blah, 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 blah. And you know what I did? I canceled all committee meetings. There will be no more committees, no more committee meetings. You can't get along with each other. You don't know anything about the teachings of Jesus. And I did. I canceled them all the committee meetings, not the people, but the committee meetings. They could not love one another and get along with one another because I had one person in there who was very, very astute and had a lot of wisdom, but they were always jealous of her. And therefore, they couldn't get along, and they fought, they did all the, that's church work. Lovely, lovely, lovely. So that's what goes on. So he says, your patience and how you cannot endure the ungodly. That's what started me on it. Because you don't show what it means to be godly. Godly doesn't mean, oh, I believe in God. No. It means you act as a child of God. And when ungodly means you don't act in justice, you don't act in peace, you don't act in love, you don't act in compassion, you don't act in forgiveness. That's what all that means. That's what he's saying, ungodly. They went for pagan things in those days, especially with Diana, right down the road. On all these beautiful homes that they have dug up, and I've seen them, and the color is still in them, and they have to keep them covered so that it will preserve the color, because the sun, it is so hot there in Ephesus. So he says here, those who are ungodly, you have tried those who say they are apostles. The word tried there means you have tested. You have tested those who say they are sent ones, that they are sent from God. They are sent ones. That's what apostles mean, sent ones. They are sent from God. And are not. And you have found them liars. Found them liars. And you have patience and have borne burdens for my name's sake because of my teachings, and have not wearied. Nevertheless, I have somewhat against you. This is something you need to get back to. It says, because you left your first love, because of all the things that they were battling. And remember, what is the consciousness here? The consciousness to solve the problem was, the one who holds the 7 stars in his right hand, the possessor. You've got to get back to who really possesses you. You think you possess yourself? Who holds the 7 stars, who possesses them. That word to hold means possesses them. Get back to your original one who possesses you. You getting back, you're losing that who really is a part of you, what possesses you. This is the Christ consciousness. In answer to this, the answer, you have left your first love. You're not burning with that original first love because you knew you were totally surrendered to that kind of consciousness. You got to get back to it. The love, the full love of the teachings of Jesus, 100%, red hot for it. So remember, therefore, from where you have fallen and turn back. Repent means, and do an about face. Get back to the first burning love of surrender. Get back to that. Find that. Go right back to it. And do the first works. You were hot then, therefore your first works had more originality in it. Or else I will come to you very soon and I will remove your menorah from its place unless you turn. You make this about face. Now, you have to understand this kind of language. It means that this was going on partly in the elder or whoever it was in charge, the pastor, whoever was the major one that he's writing to, and then the congregation. They were losing, their light was flickering because they've lost that first sense of commitment to Jesus and his teachings. And he says, I'll have to remove your menorah, your light, which means the congregation will start to break up. And the light that you possess, that you're showing in the land of Ephesus, will begin to die out. Didn't mean God say, hey, you better behave or I'm going to take your light out. No, it was their own inner condition that would gradually diminish the light. Do you understand that? God doesn't do that. God does not give you something and then takes it away. God does not do that. We do it. We do it. Not God, not Jesus. We don't do that. I mean, they don't do it. We do it. That's what we have to realize. And that's what he's saying. Wake up. Wake up. Don't let your light go out or the menorah will be gone. Which is a figure of speech, means the light in Ephesus would go out. Because even though Diana was not far from them, and the temple of Diana and all these other things going on, watch that light. Keep it red hot. Keep it burning. Keep it burning. So he says what? Then he says to them, but he didn't want them to feel, even though he was admonishing them, this is an admonishment. He says, but this you have in your favor. I know you're going through this, but I need you to be red hot. But I know you have something in your favor. Now that I've given you something, here's something in your favor. You dislike, this word, the word there, hate, is sna. And really it's sane, because he's speaking plurally. All of you hate something. You despise, it's really, you despise it because it's creating the problem in your assembly. It's creating a problem. You are despising something. And what are you despising? It says, you despise the works of the Nicolaitans, which I also despise. I love that. In other words, he's saying the message is, hey, I don't like what's going on among the Nicolaitans either. Now, what is the Nicolaitans? Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. He says here, which I also despise. He says, the works of the Nicolaitans. This is what he's despising. Not the people who belong to it. It's because they're being captured by teachings that are not good. And it's creating a problem in the church, the gathering. That's another thing, you call it the 7 gatherings or the 7 assemblies, besides the word church. And what it is here is, who were the Nicolaitans and what does it mean, the works? I despise their works because they're not showing the teachings of Jesus. Their works are not based on the teachings of Jesus. It's based on something else. That's what I'm going to get to. So who are the Nicolaitans? Okay. Why does it even say Nicolaitans? Because it's taking the name of a man, Nicholas, and it's Nicholas. Okay. Who in the world is Nicholas? Nicholas was a convert. He became converted to Jesus' teachings in Antioch. This is in Antioch. That's in Syria. Syria. Remember, the 2 major places for Near Eastern Christianity was Jerusalem, which was very Jewish, and also in Antioch, which was Jewish and a mixture of other Semitic people who were in Antioch. Antioch was a major place for the Silk Road to come and do trade work. And there's one more that goes out in Asia Minor, but I don't want to get into that. We want to stick with Revelation. So in Antioch, he was there. And then he went down to Jerusalem. This because he was a proselyte from Antioch. And Antioch is north of Jerusalem in Syria. And he went down into Israel, into Jerusalem. And if you read the 6th chapter and the 5th verse of the book of Acts, you'll find out that the apostles were getting bogged down in taking care of the needs of widows, taking care of the needs of orphans, taking care of the assembly that was in Jerusalem. And they were having a hard time financially too. They were having difficulty. And the apostles couldn't do the spiritual teaching and the spiritual work that they had to do. So they hired elders. They got in, not hired them, paid for them, but they were people who believed in Jesus' teachings. And Nicholas came down from Antioch, and he was in Jerusalem at the time. And the apostles then voted for him to be an elder. He was an elder. And so, of an elder, of taking care of all these other needs in the church, and also started teaching. But what he started teaching was against materialism. In other words, you become an ascetic. Deny the flesh. Deny everything about materialism. Deny it. Do not have anything to do with it. And this is what Nicholas was doing. And he made so many, evidently, converts, even in Jerusalem. Now, this we don't have a record on, but he was everything I've told you, there's a record on that. But right now, this is what has happened, though. He had, evidently, his teachings began to spread. So he wanted to become an ascetic. You just deny yourself. You deny yourself anything physical, materially, all of that. In other words, the teachings of Jesus. Jesus did not go into that. Jesus did not teach asceticism, which became a major thing in the church, It did. And that's the teachings of Nicholas, and you became a Nicolaitan because you're named after the man who started those teachings, Nicolaitans from Nicholas. So what they did then, these Nicolaitans, is they spread it. It went clear into Asia Minor. And they were teaching the people to be ascetic. They were teaching the people to deny their bodies, to deny certain foods, they were teaching all this kind of stuff. And that's what he means. He despised the works. That's not Jesus. What did Jesus, when Jesus was here, what did he do? He ate with the people. He ate with publicans and sinners. He was with people all the time. And in fact, they called him a glutton and a wine bibber. The people called Jesus the holy man, the teacher, the holy teacher and healer. They called him a wine bibber and glutton. Means he was eating all the time. He took care of the flesh. He ate, and he was with people. He was in their homes all the time with the different families and everything. He loved being with the people. This is not Christianity. If you purposely deny yourself for fasting, for prayer and stuff like that, that's different. That is not asceticism, where you set yourself apart and you deny everything physical, everything. So this was the teachings of the Nicolaitans, and that was not the works of Jesus. It's the works of Nicholas. So he says, verse 7, he who has ears, I love that. He who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to all the assemblies, not just to Ephesus. This is for all the assemblies now, what he's going to say. This message is for all of them, not just Ephesus. Primarily to Ephesus because it's written to them, but this is for all the assemblies, all the gatherings in Asia Minor, the 7 of them that he's admonishing. This is number 1. And he says, let him hear. You know how I would translate that? Let is fine. There's nothing wrong with let. Let is fine. I would say, he who has ears, may he hear. May he hear. You know why? Because that word to hear is in that tense you always hear me talk about, the imperfect tense. Can mean let, may, might, will, shall. It means totally future. It can mean is happening now, will happen, or let, or may. So I like the sound of it. If you have ears, may you hear. I like it. It's a little softer. May you hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies, to the gatherings, all of you, all of the churches. To him, or literally anyone who conquers. The word there actually is conquer or overcome. Overcome is fine. He who overcomes, he who is conquering. In other words, conquering the Nicolaitans, not the people, but the teachings of the Nicolaitans. If you're conquering, not buying it, not making it a part of you, and not accepting it, not denying the people who perhaps embrace it, these false teachers, they're liars, and some of the people were embracing it. If you're overcoming it, if you're conquering that false teaching, then about what true denial is when you're in special prayer time with God or fasting or whatever you wanted to do, not this ascetic type life. And he says, I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of my God. In the midst, because the best trees were always in the center of the garden. If it's on the outside, even though there were many wonderful trees on the outside, people come and they pick from the outside of a garden, because there are no walls up or anything like that. So the paradise of God, in other words, you'll because of your conquering these false teachings of so-called sent ones like Nicholas, who was really an elder in Jerusalem, and he was a proselyte from Antioch. He says, you will, if you're conquering that false teaching, and all the false teachings in all the churches that's going to be mentioned, all those teachings, all those false philosophies, false notions, false ideas, because it was taking them away from the simplicity of the teachings of Jesus. And that's the teachings of Jesus, total simplicity. So he says, you'll eat of the tree of life, which means you'll get the best fruit, the best spiritual teaching from the tree of life. You'll know life. You won't be afraid of your body, afraid of this and afraid of that and afraid of something else. You'll be eating of that tree of life because the true teachings, you'll eat the true teachings. You'll have the tree of life, which will give you life. The tree of life, which was denied in the Garden of Eden. Now, because the real tree of life is the inner understanding of the nature of your true consciousness, not consciousness of the culture, not consciousness of certain belief systems, not consciousness of politics. You go through it all, and you eat of the spiritual teachings, and you have life, you have freedom. As soon as I begin to feel frightened, scared of what people are doing, I know I'm not eating. I'm buying and eating what I'm hearing and seeing. And I'm not eating and digesting truth, which nurtures your soul, which takes out fear, which does away with all that, and it doesn't make you want to fight. You understand the true nature of the world, not the way human beings teach the nature of the world. That's the difference. That's the difference. It's spiritual. And spiritual means it's just as much as, in fact, it's more real than the physical world. More real. And the physical universe, trees and grass and all the things we see about true nature is all an expression of God. It's all God and it's all good. Oh, I've only covered one church. I hope now you remember everything I taught you tonight. And because when we get now to the next church, he says, and to the messenger of the church of Smyrna write. Smyrna is a huge, big city now. I've been in it. And you can get lost in Smyrna. He says, these things says the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. So now the consciousness is the first and the last. I'm the beginning and the ending. Who was what? Dead, but is alive. What does that mean? That's that part of consciousness which was dead, but is now alive because it has accepted a whole new way of living. This is what happens. You see, when people say they accept Christ, you got to do more than just accept the man. You got to accept his teachings. And when you accept his teachings, of course, you accept the man. If you accept his teaching, you accept him. That's why we're called Christians, because you follow the Messiah, the anointed one. And you become anointed when you follow his teachings. But it says he says, I was dead, but now I'm alive. Now here's the answer to the problems in the church in Smyrna, to this assembly in Smyrna. And that's what we'll start with next week. Okay. All right. We will start with that next week. And now I have about 13, 14 minutes to answer questions. Before I see what your questions are here, and Hanny, if anything I said today you want to add to it, you can, before I answer a question, because someone sent in a question and I want to answer it. But before I do that, do you want to add anything to what I said tonight? Any insight or anything that you may have?
No, Rabbi, I'm good. Thank you.
You're good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This says, I'm not going to reveal who asked these questions, but I know who it is. And it says, I hope you are doing well. I have a question about the self-existent one. In other words, Allah. I have a question about Allah, the self-existent one. Is it an entity? This is not new. I was asked this before by someone else. but I'll answer this again. Is it an entity? And if it's not an entity, explain what it is. Did you attend my 3-part session of the last Aramaic School of Light? I answered that. But I will go a little deeper now than I even did there, because it's to explain what is. No, God is not an entity. Please get that out of there. God is not an entity, not a person. This is why God is inexplicable. You cannot fully explain God, even referring to it. God is what is self-existent. So what is self-existent? Self-existent is it is complete and total awareness. It's pure awareness. Now, I'm going to say something. You're going to have to listen carefully. God, I'm going to explain to you, God is nothing. So if I say God is an entity, then I've got something. God is nothing. No thing. God is no thing. And that's hard for our minds to comprehend. To understand that God is no thing. Nothing. No thing. God is not material. God is not a person. That's why we say three. When people say, you believe God is 3 persons? No, God is not even one person. God is not even an entity. Someone told me that they were telling me just this past Saturday, I lectured to a group in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is about an hour's drive from here. And wonderful group. And afterwards, I did a 3-hour seminar with them. And it was nice being with people again, where you can talk to them and see them. It was wonderful. I love being there and being with the people and feeling them and seeing them, and they coming up and talking to me and touching me and wanting to hug me. And I love that too. And I loved hugging them too. But the one person came up and said, isn't God energy? No. God may express as energy because it's what is existent. What is consciousness? How can you describe consciousness? It means total awareness, the nature. We don't study the nature of consciousness. Even when we use the word mind, what is mind? Mind is consciousness. And in fact, in psychology, they broke it up into what is conscious, what is subconscious, and then they go unconscious. They have all these definitions for conscious and consciousness. Consciousness is the complete whole, and there's universal consciousness, aware of everything, because from universal consciousness, everything appears. Everything appears from universal consciousness. It is what is existent. You think you see because you have eyes? Yes, you do, physically, for material things. You think you hear because you have ears and you have the drums in there that help you for the hearing? No. You need that for the physical. When I tap this, you hear it. But that's for the physical and the taste and all that. But when you shed your body, let me tell you, you will feel, you will see, you will hear, you will have all of that. But you won't hunger. Except for the spiritual. And how do we know this? Because of people who have had NDE, near-death experiences. They haven't, in other words, they have died to a certain extent, and they said the colors are brighter, everything is stronger, because consciousness does not die. In fact, when we get in the book of the Revelation, it's going to talk about the second death concerning one of the churches there. That if you are conquering, you will not be heard of the second death. What is that second death? Has to do with consciousness, because consciousness does not die. Consciousness does not die. And we know this as a matter of fact. Even science now knows that there is a field in quantum physics and in quantum mechanics. When they broke everything down, they discovered that there is a field. There's a field, and it's in this field that all your memories, everything are stored. You think that your memories are just in your brain? No, physically, some of the things you've experienced here, but they are in that field. We live in that particular field, and the brain just picks up on it and sends it. But when you have trouble in the brain and things, you get clogged in there, just like the arteries do, then you can't pick up from it, and you lose the touch and understanding. I'm talking about when people suffer from brain problems, because the brain coordinates with this field, with this energy field. But see, I'm describing a field, but that particular field is invisible. It's not an entity. God is not an entity. God is nothing but universal consciousness. Consciousness of everything. God feels every pain. God feels everything you experience. God feels it because God is pure consciousness, pure self-existence. There is only one self, and that one self has divided itself into all humanity. It's only the human being that is the perfect picture, the perfect being that can straddle both worlds. Toggle both worlds, both the present material world and the invisible spiritual world. Only a human being can do that. Because of the way we're made. We're the tail end of creation. I didn't mean to go this because of this question here. I need to get to those other questions, but I'm teaching you deeper spiritual things that you don't hear because people don't know. They don't understand what they are. Therefore, they do a lot of other nutty things. That's why we have so many counterfeits. That's why today they think they're going to make up a world government. They're going to do this. It's nothing but a counterfeit to the true unity that only human family can give the world. Not a government, not even a health institution can give you the love and unity that humankind needs. They can give you laws and regulations and legislation, and you can't legislate peace. You can't legislate love. You can't do that. It has to come from the human heart, the human being, because we are the peculiar tail end of creation. We are the total universe in one unit. And we express that. But when people are strictly into the physical, they don't know that they are the doorway to heaven. They are the doorway to heaven, because we are in heaven now. And your body, your being, your mind is that door to heaven that swings this way and this way. Swings open to heaven and swings open into the material world. Okay. Do you have any questions there, Hanny? Hanny? He must have gone.
Nothing came. No, sorry, Rabbi. Nothing came to me.
Let me see what's here.
questions.
Thank you for another great session with enlightenment. I adore the simplicity that you find in explaining all the things we create with such complexity, right? Deep bow of honor and respect, Dr. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Bless you. Thank you. Let's see. Is there another one? I don't see any more questions.
And we are on time, so it's perfect.
Oh, we are out. Oh, it's time. Yes, it's been a wonderful evening. Thanks once again. Love you, folks. I love you with all my being, and I hope that you're grasping this And I speaking from my own heart to you, love you. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Bless you. And until next Wednesday, look at the scriptures. Send me your questions. Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.